They laughed at her thrift store dress, sneered at her cracked phone screen, and called her a charity case who doesn't belong here. But when the truth came out, that the same poor girl they mocked was the secret CEO who signed their paychecks, their laughter turned into pure silence. The crystal chandelier glimmered over the grand lobby of the Sterling Lounge, a place where luxury wasn't just displayed, it was worshipped. The sound of heels clicking across marble floors echoed like music only the wealthy could dance to. Every corner smelled of imported roses and pride. Then she entered, Amara Lewis, a young woman in a plain white blouse and worn jeans, clutching a second-hand purse close to her side. Her sneakers were clean but old, and her hair, neat, tied back yet unstyled, seemed to offend the elegance of the room. Heads turned, eyes rolled. The laughter was quiet but sharp, slicing through the air like glass. At the far corner table sat Veronica Hale, heir to a real estate empire, surrounded by her circle of polished friends. They were the kind of women who never checked price tags, who thought kindness was a weakness. When they saw Amara, Veronica leaned in with a smirk. "Who let the help in here?" she whispered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Amara paused, her heartbeat steady. She'd been here before, on this very floor, just months earlier in a very different role. Back then, she was CEO Amara Lewis, reviewing business proposals from socialites like Veronica, who desperately wanted to partner with her billion-dollar company, Luxon Enterprises. But no one had ever seen the face behind that empire. She'd stayed out of the spotlight, preferring her anonymity while her company thrived. Now she was here for something else, to remember what people valued when titles didn't speak for them. The waitress hesitated before approaching. "Ma'am, are you sure you can afford our menu?" A chuckle came from Veronica's table. Amara smiled faintly, her eyes calm but unreadable. "Don't worry," she said softly, "I always pay my dues." As she sat down, Veronica and her friends continued their cruel whispers, oblivious that the poor girl sitting a few feet away owned the very cafe they were gossiping in. And as Amara stirred her coffee, she thought to herself, "Let them laugh. By the end of today, they'll never forget this fact." The air in the Sterling Lounge grew heavier as the laughter spread like wildfire across the marble hall. Waiters exchanged uneasy glances, and a few regulars tried not to stare too openly, but curiosity shimmered everywhere. Veronica Hale, flawless in her emerald dress and dripping in diamonds, leaned back with theatrical grace. "I swear," she said loudly enough for Amara to hear, "some people just wander into places that are clearly above their budget." Her friends giggled, the sound cruel and hollow. Amara's hand tightened around her coffee cup. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but it was the first time she'd decided to let the mask slip on purpose. From her seat by the window, she could see the reflection of herself. Simple, quiet, invisible. Exactly how she wanted it. Behind those calm eyes hid the strategist who had built a billion-dollar empire out of nothing but grit, sleepless nights, and betrayal. No one here knew that the nobody in thrifted clothes had once been humiliated by investors just like Veronica's father, the same man now begging Luxon Enterprises for partnership funding. The irony almost made her smile. She took a slow sip of coffee as the door swung open. Jacob, her discreet personal assistant, entered, wearing a charcoal suit and the unmistakable badge of her company's executive circle. He spotted her, nodded subtly, and walked up to the counter to confirm a reservation under Miss Lewis. That's when the murmurs started. The manager straightened instantly. "Ms. Lewis? As in the Luxon Enterprises?" he stammered, almost bowing. Veronica froze mid-laugh, her hand halfway to her champagne flute. "Wait, what did he say?" Amara didn't look up yet. She wanted the silence to stretch, to let the confusion bloom into discomfort. Jacob approached her table and leaned down respectfully. "Ma'am," he said clearly enough for the entire lounge to hear, "the board is waiting on your approval for the acquisition announcement. Would you like me to inform the press that you'll be making a public appearance after this meeting?" For a moment, you could hear a pin drop. The room turned into stone. Amara looked up, her expression unreadable, but her voice, steady, measured, powerful, cut through the air like thunder. Tell them I'll make the announcement when I'm done with coffee. Gasps, murmurs, the socialites' faces drained of color. Veronica's confident smirk vanished, replaced by a confused, trembling smile. Amara stood slowly, the light from the chandelier catching the small diamond pendant around her neck, the only real clue to her wealth. Interesting crowd, she said calmly, glancing toward Veronica's table. I wonder how many of them would still laugh if they knew who paid for this chandelier. Her tone wasn't loud, but every word landed with the weight of revelation. Something shifted in that room. Mystery turned into fear. Humiliation began to reverse its direction. And that was only the beginning. The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice through pride. Every pair of eyes in the Sterling Lounge seemed to dart between Amara and Veronica, waiting for what would happen next. Veronica's friends shifted in their seats, trying to shrink behind their designer handbags. But Veronica, too used to commanding a room, refused to back down. She lifted her chin, forced a smile, and said, "Oh, you must be joking. The Luxon CEO? You?" Her laugh was brittle, desperate. "Sweetheart, you don't look like someone who runs a company worth billions." Amara tilted her head slightly. "That's because I don't need to look rich to be powerful." Her voice was calm, even kind, but it carried the kind of authority that silenced pretense. Jacob discreetly placed a sleek black folder on the table, embossed with the Luxon logo in gold. "Ma'am," he said, "the final acquisition documents for Hale Properties are ready for your signature." The blood drained from Veronica's face. "Hale Properties?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "That's my family's company." Amara met her eyes, unwavering. "Yes," she replied softly. "Your father's board approached us for investment. We agreed to acquire, not partner. The deal closes today." The entire room went dead quiet. The weight of those words hung like thunderclouds. Veronica's world, built on entitlement, began to crack right before her eyes. Amara rose from her seat, smoothing the wrinkles from her blouse, simple, unbranded, but suddenly regal. She looked around the room, her tone clear and measured. Sometimes people mistake simplicity for weakness. They think humility is poverty. But arrogance, she paused, glancing straight at Veronica, is the most expensive mistake of all. Veronica's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. The manager, flustered, approached with shaking hands. "Ms. Lewis, please accept our apologies. We had no idea." Amara raised a hand gently. "Don't apologize. You only revealed what you valued most." She turned back to Veronica's table, the tension almost tangible. "You judged me before you knew me. That's the difference between your world and mine. You chase appearances. I build legacies." For a moment, no one dared breathe. Then Amara gathered her folder, nodded to Jacob, and began walking toward the exit. The sound of her quiet footsteps echoed louder than any insult that had been thrown her way. But before she left, she paused by Veronica's table one last time. "You'll receive the official letter by noon," she said with polite finality. "I suggest you start treating people with the respect you expect to receive, because you never know who's watching or who's signing your next paycheck." With that, she walked out, the door gliding open as the sunlight poured over her like vindication. Inside, the rich ladies who once mocked her sat frozen in silence, staring at the door, the same door through which power had just walked out, dressed in simplicity. The city buzzed outside as Amara's car pulled away from the Sterling Lounge, but inside the tinted silence of the back seat, her expression shifted. The calm, collected exterior cracked, just a little. Her hand trembled as she removed the small diamond pendant from her neck and closed her eyes. It wasn't the insults that hurt. She'd grown immune to those long ago. It was the memory, the same kind of laughter, the same kind of disdain years ago. Back when she was Amara, the broke scholarship student at Hamilton Business School, mocked by her wealthy classmates for reusing notebooks and working part-time at the campus cafe. She'd never forgotten that day when Veronica Hale and her friends, just freshmen then, walked in wearing their glossy privilege like armor and humiliated her for spilling coffee on Veronica's designer dress. They didn't know that Amara had skipped lunch that week to afford that uniform. She had gone home, locked herself in her room, and cried, furious, ashamed, determined. That night, she wrote one promise in her journal. One day, I'll build something that no one can take away from me. And she did. Luxon Enterprises wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of pain, hunger, and humiliation, crafted from every cruel laugh, every closed door, every "you'll never make it." But as her car slowed at a red light, Amara saw something that pierced deeper than pride. On the corner stood a young girl, barefoot, holding a stack of flyers for a local startup incubator. Her clothes were worn, but her eyes held the same fire Amara once had. Without thinking, Amara lowered her window and handed Jacob a card. "Tell her to contact me tomorrow," she said softly. "She reminds me of someone I used to know." Jacob smiled knowingly. "The girl from the cafe?" Amara nodded. "Yes, the one no one believed in." As the light turned green, she leaned back in her seat and stared out at the skyline, the glass towers she'd built, the city that once rejected her now glittering in her name. But for the first time, she didn't feel satisfaction, just emptiness. Because what was the point of success if the world still judged worth by labels and clothes? That thought stayed with her through the night. The power, the revenge, the revelation. It hadn't healed her, not really. She didn't just want to be the woman who proved them wrong. She wanted to be the woman who made it impossible for anyone else to be treated that way again. And as she stood by her penthouse window that night, watching the city lights flicker below, she whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe it's time they see who I really am." The reflection staring back wasn't the poor girl anymore. It was Amara Lewis, the woman who turned humiliation into empire. But this time she wasn't after revenge. She was after change. Morning sunlight spilled through the glass walls of Luxon Tower, cutting across sleek marble floors and gold-trimmed elevators. The entire city was still buzzing from the whispers. The mysterious Luxon CEO is finally revealed. She was the poor girl from the lounge. News spread like wildfire. Social media was ablaze with clips from the cafe's security footage. Veronica Hale's smirk, Amara's calm reveal, the stunned silence. It had gone viral overnight. But with fame came venom. By noon, Amara's PR team flooded her inbox. "Ma'am, the Hale family is threatening legal action." They claim defamation. "The media is twisting your story, saying you set the whole scene up for attention." Amara stared at the glowing headlines on her screen, her heart heavy. She had power, but now she was being painted as the villain. The same world that once ignored her was now dissecting her every move. Then came the knock. "Veronica Hale is here to see you," Jacob announced, his tone cautious. Amara hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Send her in." The door opened, and Veronica stepped inside, stripped of her arrogance, but not her desperation. Her designer polish was gone, her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "You've destroyed my life," she said bitterly. "My father says it's my fault for embarrassing the company. The board wants me out. Reporters camp outside my house." Amara stayed silent, her face unreadable. Veronica's anger cracked into pleading. "Please, Amara, you've made your point. You won. Can't you stop this?" Amara rose from her chair and walked to the window, looking down at the skyline. "You think I wanted this?" she said quietly. "All I ever wanted was respect. But you gave me pity, mockery, humiliation. This isn't revenge, Veronica. It's reflection." Veronica clenched her fists. "You're talking like a saint, but you're just proving you're as cold as the rest of us." That hit deeper than Amara expected. Her voice softened. "Maybe, but I'm trying not to be." The room fell into heavy silence. Amara turned back toward her desk, staring at a document waiting for her signature, the final closure papers for Hale Properties. All it needed was her name, and Veronica's legacy would vanish. Her pen hovered. She could end it right now. But she remembered that girl on the street corner, the barefoot one holding flyers. She remembered herself at 19, crying over spilled coffee and cruel laughter. Then, with a quiet exhale, she dropped the pen. "No," she said. "I'm not going to destroy you, Veronica. I'm going to teach you." Veronica blinked, confused. "Teach me?" Amara nodded slowly. I'm offering you a job at Luxon, starting from the ground, marketing assistant. You'll learn humility before leadership. Veronica's pride cracked like glass. You're humiliating me. No, Amara replied gently. I'm giving you the same chance no one gave me. For a long moment, Veronica said nothing. Then, in a whisper, why would you do that? Amara looked her in the eyes. Because the world doesn't need another woman broken by arrogance. It needs one who's rebuilt by empathy. Veronica swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. I don't deserve that. Amara smiled faintly. None of us ever do, but that's how change begins. The following week, Luxon Enterprises announced a surprise press conference. Cameras lined the marble atrium, reporters elbowed for position, and social media lit up again. The mysterious CEO will speak publicly for the first time. When Amara Lewis walked out onto the stage, the flash of cameras nearly blinded her. She wore the same simple white blouse from the day at the Sterling Lounge. Pressed, clean, defiant. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just quiet confidence. The audience hushed as she reached the podium. Her voice, calm and resonant, carried through the room. I've heard the stories, she began. They say I'm the poor girl who fooled the rich. They say I humiliated people to prove a point. But this, she paused, glancing at the cameras, this was never about humiliation. It was about revelation. Reporters scribbled furiously as she continued. I built Luxon because I was tired of watching talent ignored for lack of status. I've seen brilliance in janitors, kindness in clerks, and arrogance in CEOs. Wealth doesn't define worth. Character does. And I'll use every ounce of my power to make sure that's what this company stands for. The room fell completely silent. Even the hum of cameras seemed to fade. From the back row, Veronica watched, no longer the sneering socialite, but a humbled woman in a simple black suit. She'd started her first week at Luxon as Amara's assistant, fetching coffee, taking notes, and listening, really listening for the first time in her life. After the speech, as the crowd dispersed, she approached Amara backstage. You were incredible, Veronica said softly, her voice thick with sincerity. I don't know how to thank you for not destroying me. Amara smiled faintly, her eyes tired but warm. You don't have to thank me, Veronica. Just pass it on. Be the kind of leader you used to laugh at. Veronica's eyes glistened. I will. For the first time, they hugged, not as rivals, not as victim and villain, but as two women who had finally understood each other. As the applause from the atrium echoed faintly behind them, Amara looked out through the glass wall at the skyline she'd built from scratch. But this time, she didn't feel the old hunger for victory or revenge. She felt peace. Her secret was no longer a mask, it was a message. In that moment, Amara Lewis, once mocked, once hidden, became more than a CEO. She became a symbol of what happens when dignity outlasts cruelty, when kindness stands taller than pride. And somewhere deep down, she whispered to the girl she used to be, you did it, but not just for yourself, for every soul the world tried to make small. Weeks later, the storm had passed. The media frenzy faded, the gossip cooled, and Amara Lewis returned to her quiet rhythm. Coffee at sunrise, meetings by noon, charity visits in the evening. But something was different now. Her face was no longer hidden behind mystery. The world knew her story, and instead of scandal, it sparked a movement. Universities invited her to speak about resilience. NGOs reached out to collaborate on youth empowerment programs. Her inbox overflowed, not with business proposals, but with letters from people who finally believed that where you start doesn't define where you finish. One evening, as the golden light washed over her penthouse office, Amara reviewed a report from Luxon's newest division, the Equal Vision Initiative, a mentorship program she'd launched to support underprivileged women entrepreneurs. And at the top of that list of mentors was Veronica Hale. Veronica had changed. She arrived early, listened more, and no longer introduced herself with her last name. She worked hard, silently, consistently. When Amara saw her mentoring interns, encouraging them with genuine warmth, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: pride. Amara walked out onto the rooftop terrace, where the city stretched beneath her in glimmering light. The skyline she once viewed as a trophy now looked like a promise. proof that power meant nothing if it wasn't used to lift others. She closed her eyes and let the evening wind brush against her face. Her mind drifted back to that first day, the laughter, the humiliation, the pain, and then to this moment of peace. Jacob stepped out behind her, handing her a cup of coffee. "Big day tomorrow," he said with a smile. "Your foundation launch." Amara nodded softly. "Yes, but this time it's not about me." She looked down at the people below, strangers with dreams in their eyes, and whispered, almost to herself, "Let them all see that grace can wear simple clothes and still build empires." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city gold. The poor girl who had once been mocked was gone. In her place stood a woman who turned pain into power and power into purpose. And for the first time in her life, Amara Lewis didn't need to prove anything. She had become the very thing they never saw coming: a leader with a heart strong enough to forgive and a legacy too bright to be dimmed.